So, my friends, do you want to learn 5 amazing MIDI velocity tricks in Logic Pro? Well, let's get started. Let's say you have a performance like these strings here. Let's open the piano roll. Okay, so here you have all the notes. Click A to open up the velocity lane. And the first tip I have for you is that you can compress or expand the dynamic range of the velocity levels right here in the automation. So if you select every note and then you use this velocity slider, you will drag all MIDI velocities up or down at the equal amount. The same goes if you use the MIDI velocity tool here to grab everything, select all up or down. It's the same as the slider. But if you just left click one of these markers once all is selected, left click, if I drag down, watch what happens. It compresses the dynamic range, and then once you're done, either you want to keep it low, or once everything is selected, then you can use the velocity slider to bring it up again like this, and now you have less dynamic range because the notes are here in the higher dynamics. Okay, or vice versa, you can expand the dynamic range. I recommend that you start by grabbing this and dragging it down to the bottom, then left click and drag up, and as you can see now you get more dynamic range. So that is tip number 1. Compress or expand the dynamics of the velocity levels. Number 2, how to create a crescendo or diminuendo on velocity levels. So if you select everything, if you just left click and drag a line like this, all the velocity levels will have a straight line, so you will lose all that variation, the actual performance. That's not what you want. You want to, let's grab this and drag it down. If you want to go with the crescendo, start at the lower, perhaps even compress it a bit. Okay, so we start there, and then you want it to expand the dynamics going higher. Well, hold down the command key while you make the line, and the steeper, the more the angle this line is, the more you will have the crescendo move with the velocity level. So at a very low setting, it's a slight crescendo. If I do it again, I do a very sharp slope like this, you get more dynamic crescendo here. And of course you can go vice versa. Let's say you start, let's compress it a bit. Let's just say start here, and then command, click, left click, drag downwards, and now you have a diminuendo. And if you overdo it, they will hit the bottom or the top, of course, like so. So you want to make sure you find a good, nice slope, something like that. Start slow, low, building dynamics. You hear those accents becoming sharper, stronger, like that. So that is tip number 2. Create a crescendo or diminuendo in the velocity levels. Tip number 3 is that you can actually select notes based on the velocity markers. This I actually found, I've used Logic for like 8 years or something, and I only found it a couple of days ago, which is, let's say you want to select, let's say you have something like this, and you believe the accents are too high because they basically hit the highest setting, and that creates, let's say you think that creates too sharp, let's do it like this so it's more prominent. Too sharp, you want to select only the highest velocities. Well, if you just, if you shift click to select those, Logic will still select everything. If you want to select only the lowest ones, like so, Logic doesn't care. It selects everything because it basically, I think this is a glitch, but what you want to do, this is a really hidden trick in Logic. Hold down Shift, Control, and Option, 3 buttons, and then select and drag out, and now you have all those selected, and then you can drag them down, let's say to avoid the highest dynamic layer. Like that, or so, for example, you want to select only the lower velocity levels, or whatever, anything inside here. Shift Control Option, and you can select the notes based on the velocity markers here. So that is tip number 3. Tip number 4 takes us to the MIDI effects, which is the velocity compressor. So let's say instead of compressing the dynamics like I just showed you here, like so, let's say these are hitting the roof, and you want to compress only the highest dynamics here, that layer. Well, you add the velocity processor MIDI effect on the channel. Let's see, this is it. And then you choose the mode compressor expander, and then you set what level, the velocity level, the compressor should start, the threshold. So let's say everything over 100 I want to compress downwards a bit, and then I set it to 2 here, ratio 2. Now that means that it basically does the same thing as taking everything here above 100 and then compressing it downwards. Okay? That is what it's doing in the background, so it won't show here, but I mean, compare before. Now those accents are very sharp, but with it on, let's move it downwards and compress it even harder, like so. So now those accents, listen to the accents, because those are the ones hitting the compressor hardest. Very, very sharp, like that, but with it, you're only compressing the highest dynamics here. And you can, of course, go in the opposite direction with an expander if you want to, but in most cases, I think compression is better. Okay, so that is tip number 4. The next one, tip number 5, is to use the velocity add scale MIDI effect. So it's the same effect, but instead of using the mode compression expansion, add scale. And this is really nice because you can actually use this to add or reduce the velocity setting. So it will be on 0 here. Set this to 100% and then set this on 0 and it won't do anything. But as you can see, I have actually recorded automation on this because what that makes you able to do. So I have used here the velocity and then add, and then you see the lane here, and I go from -60, which is basically like taking, let's go back to the velocity markers, like taking everything here and dragging it down 60 from where it was before. Okay, so it will start down here, and then it will move up to the initial setting with this effect, the velocity add, because it starts with subtracting, and then I have recorded it. As you can see, this line go to 0, so default position. So it will end on what you actually see here, but these notes, or these velocity levels will be in the background. You won't see it here, but in the background they will be 60, -60, and then go up and up, like before. But with, I'm basically creating crescendo here. As you can see. And this way you can actually shape arcs and swells, crescendos and diminuendos in the velocity levels without having to use this technique I showed you earlier with the command line tool. So you can create, let's say we start at -40 and then go up at the second bar here, or even let's do 1 bar transitions like this. Then select those. You can, by the way, this is a bonus tip. Option click and you can, whoops. Why doesn't it work? Like that. Option left click and drag. So you can drag it outwards like that. Now you have like an arc here. by the way. I think you can actually... Yeah, you can see this expands as well, because at the lower setting, this is compressing or expanding the differences in the CC lane here, as you can see. Let's move it up a bit, like that. No, too high. Something like that instead. Goes up, down. So in the background, this will be applied to these velocity markers in your performance. So all of these are great ways to shape and automate the velocity levels, which controls the dynamics on many sounds in your music projects, like short strings, piano, and so on. Now choose which video you are going to watch next, or you can check out the amazing bonuses in the video description.